Good to see everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Brandon. I run Top of Funnel Growth Marketing Agency. We use Clay every single day, all day, every day. And we do a lot of obviously go-to-market stuff. And we also do more top of funnel things like landing page, full funnel build outs, evergreen automations. But Clay is our operating system, big time. And we pretty much do a lot of the heavy lifting that a lot of people don't want to do, looking at spreadsheets all day. So I work with Instantly, I've worked with Forbes a few years ago and a lot of Fortune 500 companies and startups. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Brandon's one of the best. We're thrilled to have him on today. Really thrilled to have everyone here. This is a pretty stacked lineup. Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, absolutely. I am Patrick Spychalski, co-founder of the Kiln. We're an agency that does clay, among other things, mostly for mid-market to enterprise businesses. And of course, over here, also massive power users of clay. Super pumped to be here and appreciate you guys having me on.
Awesome. And Ashley?
Awesome. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Artrip. I'm a go-to-market engineer at Clay. Patrick, I love the hat, bringing great vibes as per usual. I just had to make that comment. Bringing good vibes. I love it. I just have a fun orange background here, but that's okay. So I have the pleasure of working with some of our biggest customers at Clay, working on creating really amazing creative outbound tactics, as well as inbound and pretty much everything in between. So I'm really excited to kind of share what I've learned and kind of had the front seat of and kind of some of these most recent customer use cases. So yeah, very, very excited to be here.
That's awesome. And you probably have one of the coolest job titles in the world right now. So
very hot title. Yes. I feel like I jump on every first call and I have to explain what is a GTM engineer. So it always sparks really fun conversation. Kind of the simple way I put it is if kind of product and solutions engineering and a little bit of account executive, if you combine those things, the best of those three worlds, that's really what a GTM engineer is. It's really fun.
that's really cool. And so for everyone here, the goal of today is we're going to share some real clay tables and ideally actionable tactics that you can take and apply. Before we do that, I'd love to get like the thoughts of the group here. How has outbound changed over the last, I was going to say like couple years, but even the last like 6 months? Like, is there certain ways that you are helping customers or your clients think about things differently, where things that worked 6 months ago don't work anymore, or things are possible now that just weren't possible before? So the door is really open in a new way.
Patrick, you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. So I probably will sound like a broken record saying this because I've been saying this probably like quarterly for the past 2 years, but outbound is just consistently getting more and more difficult to do effectively. And I define difficult as you have to put in more effort in order for it to work. I mean, if you extrapolate this back to when outbound started as a thing, like when you could send high scale email, you could just, of course, blast with zero personalization, zero attention to deliverability, and have zero problems with getting responses. And as that's progressed to the, I'd say like latter end of that spectrum, you now have to include so much volume, or maybe not volume, but so much personalization, so much value to the people that you're reaching out to that it becomes vastly more difficult. So in short, you have to spend a lot more time in doing this. I would say a lot of the things that have been working for us that have kind of allowed us to maintain the similar positive response rates that we had before are doing smaller, more like targeted micro campaigns for a specific thing, focusing a lot on warmer leads. So people that are interacting with you on LinkedIn or filled out a form or are visiting your website, as well as just using tools like Clay to create really, really personalized messages and kind of hacking your way to creating a value adding asset that you can then send in a message. Additionally, using other channels like LinkedIn, I know Brandon will probably touch on X as well, to do outbound has also been a pretty big unlock for us. Pretty much every client we have at the Kiln, we essentially forced to use LinkedIn in their outbound now because the positive response rates are just so high. It works a lot better. And it seems to be where people are kind of living now when they want to get sold to. So yeah, those are a few high level thoughts. But in short, it's getting harder. You have to spend a lot more time to do it effectively, but it is by no means dead. Which is what a lot of people I think tend to perpetuate.
Not dead. That's good. All right, we just lost Brandon, so hopefully he's okay.
Tough.
And just to double click on that, like, what do you think good benchmarks are today, or like real benchmarks are today in terms of like one volume? Like, what are people really sending out in terms of number of emails or number of emails per email account? And what would like a decent reply rate be? Like, assuming you're doing most things right, but you're not necessarily the best in the world.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts there. The first thing is volume varies like crazy if we're talking overall volume of a campaign. For example, Taylor Heron, somebody I know well and is really good at cold email, just sent out apparently 8 million emails in 1 month for one of his clients. So like you can still send volume at a pretty high level of deliverability, as absurd as a number of that is. In terms of emails per inbox, we're still seeing like 10 to 30, depending on how conservative you want to be, emails a day per inbox, and then usually like 2 inboxes per domain. In terms of benchmarks for reply rates, the person I trust the most on this is Eric Nowoslawski, who probably sends more cold emails than some countries send emails in total. And
That's incredible.
He's always said that or not always, but at least recently, he says usually like 1 in 300 people you reach out to positively responding in email is a decent benchmark to look at. For like a high scale cold email campaign. If you're doing a low scale targeted campaign with warm leads on several channels, that number drops significantly. It's hard to give an exact range. It really depends on the industry and who you're reaching out to. But for a good campaign, like if you're trying to figure out, is my campaign doing well or not, like it should be somewhere between like 50 and 250, 1 in 50 to 1 in 250 people reached out to positively responding. But again, it's really hard to gauge. It's so contingent on your offer, the thing that you're pushing, the deal size that you're usually the deal size that you're sending or pitching in the email, your offer. Like, so those are some like general ranges we're seeing. Like 1 in 325. If it's worse than 1 in 325 people, you can immediately say this is probably not going well. And then everything under that depends on the sort of campaign you're running.
Yeah. And I think, even what you said might be a lower reply rate than people expect. I think that's important to note with like cold outreach in general. The point is you're able to reach out to people cold, like anywhere in the world at any time. And that's really cool. But your conversion rates, it might be, a low sample of the total overall, unless you're doing different things and reaching out to warmer leads.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're sending 10,000 emails a week or something, that positive response rate is something you should probably optimize for. Because I mean, at that volume, it still yields probably pretty solid number of leads. But of course, if you're doing LinkedIn outreach to 100 people a week, that's unreasonable. You have to find a way to increase positive response rates then. And that's of course just by adding value, adding personalization, and changing your strategy to be a lot more custom, which is kind of how we gauge campaign strategy for a lot of companies. Is like, what is your TAM? How many people are you trying to reach out to every month? That's going to essentially dictate the level of effort you want to put into the campaigns, like from an email to email or message to message basis, which can then lead to what sort of systems do we want to create? Do we want to create enablement systems for sales team members on your team? Or do we want to send really high scale automated outbound? It's just like, that's how you kind of come to that conclusion.
And do you think and this is for the group too, do you think that people are consistent in the way they measure like what good looks like? Like, is it replies, revenue? How do you really know, is something working or not?
People are not consistent in measuring that. It really depends. And that's why it's important to kind of dictate before you run a campaign what is going to be a number we're happy with from either pipeline generated or positive responses generated, or meetings booked. At least from what we've seen, like when we're dealing with across clients, like some clients are just like, I want to book 100 meetings this month. Some are like, we want to close X amount of deals, and it's like, I don't know. It's usually good to at least manage expectations when we're doing that.
Brandon, you made it back.
I did. I don't know if that was me or what, but I just disappeared. So glad to be back though.
Awesome. Is there anything you want to add on like what good looks like when it comes to outbound? Like either. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll echo Patrick, even though I got like the bun, like I missed the meat, but like the two ends, right? The beginning and the last. But I echo everything I heard. I think it comes down to marketing in general, that people's attention spans are obviously really hard to get. So some things that even cold, outbound, like no matter what the channel is, to get somebody's attention, let alone cold. Maybe you guys haven't heard of F-shaped reading before. Encourage you to check that out because it's, I think, a real thing. And that is the opening line. They talked about personalization and relevance and things like that. Really cut the small talk. That's what we've done. It's like nobody cares and you're doing a great thing, or I'm really impressed by your profile. Like that stuff doesn't work, right? Cut the small talk, especially when it comes down to breast tax or TLDR kind of scenario. But just like what echo, or just to echo what Patrick has said, we have had to do more creative lead magnets or more creative, really top of funnel stuff, which is simply creating awareness, not even going for the pitch, not even really asking for a demo or anything like that. Sometimes it's a lot more creative or completely sidetracked of the offer itself because it's more implied that awareness of a problem and just to be educated more. So having webinars, having free like a podcast, something that is really lowering the barrier to entry in terms of asking something if it's worth their time. So instead of going like, can I book a demo or can I send you a video how it works? I mean, those kinds of things work depending on the vertical and if it's noisy or not. But for a lot of our clients, we've had to sometimes even get an in-person event for local areas or even arrange travel just for simple awareness. Sometimes it's webinars, sometimes it's podcasts. And then they start to become warm leads or more opt-in. And then you have a pulse, and that's where signals obviously come into play. So it's just really about turning a cold into a warm lead, making them nurture more, and then eventually they'll start to buy in more where they're more open because trust is huge, right? And then I would say if I had to put a number on it, cold emails, generally speaking, should be no more than 75 words. That's pretty much in our system prompt across all copy that we do when we send it to a copy agent. Leveraging agents with context. We keep it short, sweet, to the point with the punchiest big opener ever that's relevant. And we have very creative lead magnets. So I would just say that you got to be more creative than ever. And it's great because we have AI for that. So
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I would like to quickly just echo everything that you just said, Brandon. And I think the kind of theme that I heard throughout everything that you just said is actually like adding value. Whether it's, hey, attend this webinar, like here's information that you're going to learn, or here's something that you didn't previously know, or hey, we would like to invite you to like a nice dinner, whatever it may be, whatever kind of play you're using, it's adding value. And I think to the point of creativity, I think there's actually a way to mix the two of those, of creativity and adding value. And so a good example I like to think about is some work that we've done with Canva. So for some of their outbound tactics, what we actually did was used AI to help brands that they wanted to reach out to detect misalignment and overall like brand image and identity. And actually that was the outreach message is, hey, did you actually know like your social media branding is not matching like what's on your website? It's adding value, it's punchy, it's short, it's cutting the no small talk. So everything that you said, Brandon, is completely spot on.
Yeah, thank you. I would say just 3 words: pique their curiosity. That's it. Just pique their curiosity because then it's like they raise an eyebrow, like, you know what? I want to learn more, right? Curiosity is the biggest thing because to get the reply, because that's gonna grab their attention. Something that's completely outside the box for whatever the offer might be.
This question might not have an answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm hopeful it does. Like Ashley, that Canva campaign is brilliant. Is there a framework that you use or know about to help you find creativity and be able to scale? Like, how do you get that?
Yeah, so I wish I could just give you like a perfect clean framework. It takes a lot of people is actually like the first thing is it doesn't take one person in a room by themselves thinking about this. So you should involve broader team members as part of like what is the unique value that we're adding? But beyond that, beyond kind of tapping into other brain power, it is actually quite simple in terms of like the framework. So one is actually like the most important, which is your unique data advantage. So for the Canva example, going with this, right, is their unique data advantage in this case was actually that brand detection and the misalignment. So they used that kind of data advantage to get in front of the customer and actually have a message that made sense, right? We've seen other examples like Intercom. What they've done with their outbound strategy is they actually will scan through support docs of companies that they want to go after. And they can basically say like, hey, we see that you don't have a ton of support docs. With Intercom, you can actually build an entire knowledge base very easily that would really beef up kind of the kind of gap that you have. So one is identify what your unique data value is or what you can uniquely solve for that customer. Two is in kind of playbooks. So like, what are those moments of change? What are those variables that would be a perfect excuse to make your outreach timely and relevant to them? We've all had messages come through that are like, this is great, but like totally wrong time. This is not it. So that's when kind of like using signals and kind of getting a broader understanding of what's actually happening at this company right now. And then knowing when that is, it's a better time to reach out. And then the last one is tactics, right? So it's, a multi-channel approach. It's experimenting, it's having an engine to support that experimentation and testing, because everything you should be doing is approaching it with a scientific method. Here's the hypothesis, here are the variables, here's what we're going to change, here's what we're not going to change, and let's actually see the results and then make changes from there.
I really, really like that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on how to really roll out creativity?
Yeah, what's nice about the tools that are currently available to us, Clay included, obviously a lot of the vibe coding tools out there as well, is that you can kind of build whatever you can dream up. And so I think before, your creativity was throttled to some extent by the data points or the systems that were available to you to build. You can kind of make the general assumption now that whatever you dream up, as long as it's not like absolutely absurd, you can probably build. And so I think just either like watching a bunch of content that people post on LinkedIn has helped me come up with campaign ideas, because I will see that they'll use a certain element or a certain data point that I didn't know could have been found before or I didn't think of. And I'll think, oh, like that could tie into this use case for a client or for ourselves internally. Or just scrolling through, even like, as crazy as it sounds, like integration pages for some of the tech that I use, like the core tech I use, can be really valuable. Like, for example, if I'm going through Clay's integrations, I might not have known you could find the tech stack for a company, and then suddenly that unlocks a couple ideas. Like, oh, like, well, if I can find that they use this technology, I can make this assumption and reach out to them with this idea. So, I would just say, like, as much as it's not a directly productive and impactful thing on the surface, just like scrolling through content and scrolling through pages of integrations for pieces of tech can actually be pretty helpful for sparking ideas.
100% agree on that. It's just constantly even looking through the integrations to see what was added. Ashley knows it, but they're always dropping new integrations all the time. And even with the API, the HTTP API, I mean, you can literally plug the entire internet into a Clay table. But it makes it easier when things are integrated, because a lot of times you can just use a Clay credit to experiment with it. And that's huge, because there's no other tools out there that makes it that easy just to use a Clay credit, just to even test, right? So run segmented campaigns on a test sample and just see if it does. And that's the great thing, because you don't have to hop on all these demos or anything. You can just look through the integrations, see what they're about, run a free trial or whatever. Use Clay credit and see what result you get. It's all about just data, right? You're pushing and pulling data wherever it is. And I mean, I like to call Clay the Photoshop of data, because your blank canvas, you can just make whatever canvas you want into a beautiful art form, right? Rows and columns. So
awesome. Well, I think that is the perfect segue to go into sharing some real Clay tables, some really creative Clay tables too. Does anyone want to start first? Or I'll call it Patrick.
I'm down to go. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I want to give a quick high level of what this Clay table does, and then I'll go into actually how it's built. So the reason I built this Clay table is I found this tool called Lovable. It's like a vibe coding tool. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. And you can create custom websites or dashboards or graphics very easily just using natural language. So like, think of how ChatGPT can generate like a text response for you, or like maybe an image. Lovable can create entire websites or entire graphics or dashboards for you. And I was talking to one of their team members, and he was like, hey, we have this internal API where you can actually like connect an API to something to build like lovable websites. So I was thinking like, oh, if I use this API in Clay, I can build, hundreds of dashboards or hundreds of websites at a time. And the reason I think this is valuable is, as I mentioned before, I think Outbound is just going to get consistently harder over time. And as you do that, you're gonna have to continue to add more value to prospects. And so my whole thought is like, if you can create something completely bespoke and working, or even like an MVP of an idea that you could build for a prospect, then in theory, you're doing something that before would have taken tens of hours, if not hundreds of hours of work to build, and you can do so at scale, and send it to prospects, and hopefully it's valuable. So I'll show the table that I built now and kind of how it works. In short, though, what it does is it ideates, it has a list of prospects. So I imported a list of companies. It comes up with the software that would be valuable for that company based on a bunch of company data. And then it actually uses that to generate a prompt that feeds into Lovable that creates a custom software, dashboard, or website for each prospect at scale. So I will share my screen now. Okay, cool. Bethany, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I just wanted to show you what Lovable looked like first before I went and showed the clay table. I literally just said, this was for like a LinkedIn post I put up a few days ago. I just said, create like a vibey, colorful slide that says 5 AI tools every sales leader should know about. And that literally, that's all I did. And then it made this. And then I said, make it more vibey. And then now it like has all these animations and stuff. And I just wanted to show that because it shows how Lovable is. Like, it's just so simple to create things with the tool. So here's a clay table I
That
actually built.
AI knows what vibey means.
I knew it could read my mind, so but either way, so I imported a list of companies here. You can see we have like 14 example companies. And I really didn't care what the companies did. I don't think that was the point of the table. And in this hypothetical, I figured I would be a software development agency. So like a fractional software development agency that these companies would hire to build things for them. So what I did was Clay gives you some basic information on these companies prior to running any enrichments within a table. So I have their like location and their industry and all the basic info you could want about the company, domain and LinkedIn URL included. I then enriched the company. I needed a few different things from this enrichment. I needed their logo URL. I needed a description of the company. I needed to know what industry they were in. And the reason I needed these things was because I wanted to go feed them into a Lovable prompt eventually. So you can see I have their logo URL right here. I can click on this one. The logo URL pops up. I also used an integration in Clay to find a screenshot of their website. I did this so I could use another API to find their brand colors. And the idea behind this was if I was to create a website or a software or a dashboard for this company, I want their logo and their brand colors to be on the website to make it custom for them. I then scraped their entire website. I believe this was with Zenrose. Yeah, with Zenrose. And I got essentially all of their website data, or as much of it as I could, to give more context to the AI prompt I was going to be feeding Lovable. I then used Clayagent. For those who don't know what Clayagent is, it's a way to find, it's like a custom agent that can do research for you within Clay to find data. I use that to generate a custom software idea for these companies. So I said, I run a web development agency. I'd like to create an MVP for this business, but I don't know what I should build for them. So here's some information on the company, and I fed all the company information into this, and it generated a custom software idea for me. And then I'll also output a prompt for that idea. So you can see here, I now have a prompt that I can feed Lovable that ideally will have Lovable generate this piece of software for me. Converted it to JSON. I sent it to N8N, which housed my API for Lovable, which could then help generate the software. And then that N8N workflow returns that into this table right here. So if I click on any of these, and I've pulled up a few tabs, I now have Clay at the click of a button auto-generating dashboards and websites for these companies using the company's logo and their colors. And these are interactive dashboards that actually work. So like they're at least MVPs of, and you can like click into them and see how they work fundamentally. So super cool, I thought. And then after you've generated the dashboard, you can just use what the dashboard or the email or the website actually is to create an outbound email line. Super basic. It just says like, we created an MVP of an AI powered automated response and insights tool tailored for whatever the company is, and would love your feedback on this to see if it's interesting. And so you can then send that to a campaign, and suddenly you have a machine in Clay that can generate software at scale, send it to people to see what they think about it. And yeah, I just thought it was a fun table. Disclaimer, I haven't tested this campaign at all, so I don't know if it would work or not. I just think this general idea that you can build software or dashboards or images like and send them to prospects really quickly is a pretty enticing one. But unfortunately, I couldn't share any of the stuff we're doing for our clients, which ties pretty directly into this, but I figured this would be the closest to doing so. So that is it. Of course, if you have any questions about any of these, happy to show to answer the questions as well.
Yeah, and if anyone has questions about this specific table, then feel free to just pop them in the chat, and Patrick can take them now. I also want to add, like, what's kind of cool, like watching Patrick share that, like you might think, how did he ever think about these things and like string this all together? But I think it comes down to what someone said earlier, that's like anything's possible right now. So if you have the end goal of what you want to do, like the answer's probably in Clay somewhere, and you can use Chat GPT to help you figure out how to do it and then set it up. So it's not about like memorizing what Patrick just showed. It's like, no, well, what do I want to show? I want to show, the prospect website, or like, a custom website for them. I want to show a mini demo. I want to do this and that. And like the answers all exist now, which is crazy.
Yeah, honestly, like I think the ability to build these things is really just comes with tool knowledge over anything else. I think if you have enough context about what these tools can do, you can kind of intuit the map in your head, or maybe if you want to even just create a mirror board to help you visualize it. And it becomes pretty easy to create. Like that only took me, I think, like 2.5 hours. And a lot of that was just like errors with API calls. And it's really just because if you can create the mental map, then the rest of it's actually not that hard because of amazing tools like Clay and N8N.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked, is your target audience SaaS, or what other use cases work?
For this case, it could have been really any company. I'd imagine SaaS actually would be lower on the totem pole of companies that need software custom developed for them. For example, like I'd actually envision like a lawn care business or something where you could, book appointments easily and be able to manage your appointments and change them. Would actually need this, like a software development agency, more than a SaaS company that has, hundreds of developers sometimes internally to be doing this sort of stuff. So in this case, it could be for anybody, but I'd imagine the use cases of connecting vibe coding tools to Clay can go to really any business.
Amazing. Any other questions? Pop them in. And I'll also just say there, like, I think sometimes the more complicated your outbound is, the more it works with industries outside of SaaS, because they're totally blown away, right? So someone else maybe in SaaS is like, oh, I've seen, how you could create custom landing pages. But yeah, someone in a older industry might just be extra impressed.
Definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's pass the baton on to Brandon. If you want to show your Clay table now.
Perfect. My Clay table, definitely Patrick brought it. That's some A-game stuff, so I hope I can get at least to that. My thing is, I wanted to experiment more, especially with Clay's new signals feature, which obviously is huge. And it's so huge that our last Clay Salt Lake City event, a lot of people are just getting their feet wet with Clay, let alone creating any signal, right? And it was a big topic because it just basically came down to, I would say, two things: triggers and actions. If you think about it, there's always triggers and actions and a sequence of how your day operates, right? And Clay is really good at being able to keep a pulse on these triggers so you can take action. And if you think about it, when you wake up in the morning, for those that drink coffee, usually you automate that, so you don't want to do that manually, but there's always going to be a trigger and then an action where you consume your coffee and then you go about your day, right? And with Clay, you're pushing and pulling data. The signals thing, I think, is huge. In fact, I don't think a lot of people really understand like the customizations and how good it would be just for even for your CRM data to be able to know, where does your industry live? What digital footprints do they have? Because obviously you want to leverage those. It's definitely known that LinkedIn is one of the best, but I don't think X gets the attention it should have with how much power Clay's integration with it is wild. And I'm going to show you another one too, because I like to just call them the consultants, but you have Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, but then there's also Grok, and there's a lot of them as well. But they always have things are always coming out. But Grok, if you aren't aware, released their live search endpoint. It's not yet in Clay, Ashley, but you can make the HTTP API call and it's connected to live search, which actually is real-time data on the X platform, which can give you huge things like citations and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to show how you can use it, pull that for context AI, and then obviously your output to start conversations. So let me make sure I'm sharing the right one. All right, can you guys see Clay and not everything else?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I tried to make this as simple as possible. I'm happy to answer any questions. But really the signal thing here is, you start off with a signal. That's the starting point. Okay, where do these people exist? Where are they posting? At least my perception is when you post on LinkedIn, there a lot of posts on LinkedIn are very like formalized and businessy, right? Usually you're going to find like a lot more on LinkedIn in terms of just the way LinkedIn as a social media platform is. X, I mean, you literally, it's like brain to fingers, right? It's people just post whatever. And so I thought, what better signal for a founder or somebody who is immediately trying to start up and then gets funded by like YC or anything like that, Series A, Series B, they're going to tweet about it or post about it, whatever you want to call it, right? And so I'm like, that's an easy filter to grab as a signal and then take it and run with it using Clay. So I set up a signal on a weekly basis and it costs just 1 credit. So to me, that's very inexpensive. And I just did a simple handle or keyword, and it's similar to Boolean, but usually the ors would be capitalized, but this works. So if they do we raise, just raise, seed round, or all these other things, these are keywords that I could pick up on. And then, of course, I want to remove retweets because I don't care about downline, generally speaking. Usually it's the founder that's going to tweet this, right? And so I want to pick up on that and then basically have it pulled in as a webhook to the Clay table. And just as an example, we have sweep here. So you can see the data here, which is actually a lot of information already. I mean, there's only so much to a tweet, right? But we just raised our Series B. This round will help us go even further to blah, 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 right? Then you have the user, you have all the data points here. You can see if it's a retweet, false. I want to make sure it's good. This is somewhat recent, right? So it was maybe a few weeks ago. And then it gives you the URL, so you can click on that and go right to it. This you add to table. The other thing that I like to do is just as best practice is not all data points. Being a diver, Beth and I, we all talked about that. There's certain things you bring to the surface, in my opinion, that you want to see at a high level and analyze like a sheet. And then there's certain things you could actually just leave under the surface, but you can still reference it. So to me, table control is huge when it comes to logic and making things really, really clean and neat. And just knowing your clay table is just gonna, there is an art and science to building clay tables, believe it or not. So um, basically my point is you don't always need to add to column in order to create rows and rows or columns of just data, right? Try to understand, you can reference it here. So we have the text here because I just wanted to see it. And then I can also see the likes and views and retweets. So this could also be like a threshold or really you can do a conditional formula to see if it meets this criteria. Like, hey, like this one right here, that's pretty big stuff. The retweets, obviously this one right here, it's probably going to be a high celebration, right? Clearly it's getting some visuals there. And then this is the Grok 3 live search, which was recently released. And just to bring your attention to here, this was posted here. The X API just got a lot smarter with live search. Grok can now search through real-time data from X, which is the only one, and the internet, trading news, and more. So I'm thinking, well, if they tweet about it, and I can actually go into that with the live search, why not, right? And Grok 3 Mini is also a reasoning model for this use case. I just went for the Grok 3 latest, but I went into the API. And so if you go to their endpoint right here, they have the live search. And a lot of times you can punch this into an AI model like ChatGPT, but really you just take the curl request, you punch that in, you change up the payload here for what you want. And then I like to think if you can get a 200 status code in less than 5 tries, you're doing pretty good. But first try out, obviously is is the best you can get. So if you paste it here, and a lot of times if you just use AI to kind of, because sometimes for people, JSON is a bit confusing with all the curly braces and commas. But once you get to work, another best practice is to save as a template. So that way you can use it in other tables. That way you don't have to always recreate things, right? So, and then with headers and API keys, I would always encourage you guys to store that versus putting it what used to be down here. So when you screen record, everybody has your tokens, right? So you can see this is the role, the user, this is the message. I just said, provide me the details around the handle and what they say around this text. The goal here is to be able to get more information regarding funding rounds at a startup company. And then the thing about AI is it's really, really good at giving you an output. Every time you're going to get an output, whether it's right or wrong, hallucinating, or the output that you desire is up to you, right? It's all on the prompts. And you always want to give the AI, I've found anyway, an out. Give it a very, very specific out if it cannot find something versus making some stuff up. So I just said only output null and only null if you believe with high confidence that this post is not speaking about raising money for their company. So that way, if it's not about, sometimes they might fundraise about something else. Like I want to be able to filter that, right? So under conditional logic with formulas, I could say if this contains null, do not move forward, right? So that is the prompt here. And then you will see just in here, we'll bring up this one, but we have the usage. And so obviously tokens, that's pretty low there. And then I go to choices and I see the message right here, but it tells me everything about Sweep, not to put them on the spot. I don't work with them, but just as a use case, it tells me everything I need to do or everything about the context around it as if I fed it into Grok. And then you'll also notice here, we have a ton of citations around the source behind what they got. So if I even went to this website, you could see from the SaaS News that they did, that they indeed fundraised, right? So now that I could do that, I could take it further. I could scrape this. I could do a whole lot of things. But for what I did is I actually went into good old Claygent. As Patrick said, this is literally like the best thing ever for Clay. And it's so customizable and it's only getting better. You know, you can't think like, how can Claygen get any better? Well, it definitely is. So the thing with, again, with AI, and I like to think of the best source of truth is from the makers themselves, because everything else is kind of a waterfall, no pun intended. But as things change, the foundations of using AI really comes down to how to communicate with them. And the thing that AI models are really, really good at is code, right? Vibe, that kind of thing. So they will definitely spit out some code. And so, but what AI doesn't have is emotion or a way to prioritize what you're saying. So if you're using your text or speech to text and you're just typing away, then a lot of times it's not gonna, it's gonna tokenize and it's not gonna really know like what's important, what's not, what should I bold, what is something that is like alternative or optional. So two things, what I would suggest is use Markdown and use XML tags. And basically this is exactly what an XML tag is. You'll notice that I wrap it in the role. And so basically it knows like this is the role. And then I'll put it in Markdown, which Markdown is becoming a lot more popular. You can actually copy and paste and like ClickUp and Notion, and it just looks beautiful. Like you have headers and H1, H2, H3 tags. So it's even more readable for us. And so anytime you just say output with high level XML tags, because you don't want everything to have an XML tag, you'll see what I'm talking about. It looks like HTML all over the place. But simple things like this really does add a little bit more to your models to get the right thing every time. And then we'll set, so I did the role, the task. I talk about the parameters around that task, good and bad examples. And then I have citations and then the output. So I like to output in JSON just because it's always structured. It's not always a stringified, just word salad, right? So I usually just say exactly this. And I don't come up with this just typing. I'll just basically speak what I want to an AI model like ChatGPT. And then I say, output this in a code snippet so I can copy and paste this into Claygen. And it gives me this. And then I say output in schema. And this works beautifully every time. And this is basically it. And then I'll go into here and you'll see right here, founders, boom, right? And then it talks about steps taken, and then it has reasoning. So just from this alone and the LinkedIn profile. So I said I wanted the name and the LinkedIn URL from an X post. I mean, you're connecting two different worlds and bring them together inside just a few rows or a few columns, right? And what I did next here is the thing is, we don't actually know, like for this, for example, we have 4 founders. So this is basically called an object. So you have one data point with 4 in an object. Thing is natively, I could add the column, but I don't really want to add the column. I want to keep this nice structured data, right? Because I want to actually take like Vinay and Parveen and all these, and now I want to go 4 rows, right? So I need to convert this one object to 4 rows. And so there's a number of ways you can do that. Obviously, write to table is a good option too. I'll talk about in a second, but I just used N8N to essentially send the data, do a workaround to split out, and then send back to Clay through a webhook. And it's just, to me, a lot easier to go ahead and type out the JSON with all the data points that I want, such as this, and it'll reroute, and I'll show here in a second. But with that, I'm still at the post or company level, right? So I don't really want to do anything with people just yet, just to save resources, because I don't necessarily want to enrich 4 people, their company information 4 different times, because you're going to use a lot more credits than you need to, right? So I want to score a little bit more. So what I did was with Claygen is do the old B2B, B2C thing. Again, we have XML and Markdown around setting the role, the task, and then controlling the output, just like I did right here. And you'll see right here, let's see. So we have, and this will basically narrow down if it's B2B market type, B2B or B2C, or both. That's the 3 criteria there. And then I went company overview. So the company overview, I wanted to take everything I just got and do exactly the same thing. And then the other thing too, as you can see right here, the citations to research. I fed in all of the citations to Claygen. You can see some of these have 15, 10. These are all citations around the context of the one post on X, right? So think of it like research. I mean, you know how much time it takes to research a company, especially like I said, X and LinkedIn and all these things to actually formulate good copy to somebody or reach out to them. Same thing. What I did is I broke it down to 3 JSON here. So I wanted to know the mission. What is their mission? What are they about? The reasoning is just a default, like this is why I decided. But the other 2 that I did is what they do, and then a fundraising goal, like what is their mission? Sometimes it might be solving for cancer. Sometimes it might be world peace. You never know, right? So, but at the same time, Clay is not, in my opinion, just GTM. Like it's literally marketing and getting a means to mold data to an output or a desired output, right? And we're leveraging all these integrations, 2 worlds, X and LinkedIn, Big Blue and Elon, whatever. Like, obviously, we are making them shake hands in this one table, right? So you can see there. And then, yeah, I did the wraparound to the founders. And then just right here, this is going to take the 4 founders. So sometimes we have 1 founder, sometimes we have 4, it might have like 8. And I can send that object all through another Clay table right here. And so I hid this is just a webhook table, but I like to hide just so it's nice and clean, right? So I did that, and then I'm doing the free integration, which is simply just to check if the website's valid, because you just never know. If the website is not good, well, why would you want to waste any credits if the website's not valid? It's free. It's like a why not kind of thing, right? I populated the handle, the X post, the views, just at a high level. I did your standard LinkedIn URL, and then I enriched the person. Like we all know, basically, you can see on the back end of everything around the person, their experience. If it loads here in a second. Yeah, you see everything about them, their summary, right? So that's pretty standard in my opinion. And then the other thing I want to call out, obviously, is enriching, like finding an email address. Like if I'm going to reach out to them through email, well, I need a good email address. So I like to use full enrich. There's obviously a lot of integrations and waterfalls that you can do, but I kept it simple for this use case. And then the other thing that I use all the time, my team and I, this is like the most popular output or template that we use, is normalizing first names. So sometimes you'll have rocket ship Ashley or diver Bethany or vibey Patrick emoji, that kind of thing, right? No, but everybody's going to know if you're automating some stuff. And so sometimes you're going to have their name in parentheses, like you right here. So if I said, "Hey Jasper," he may not actually want to be called Jasper. He might want to be called you, right? So what I do, and you take a lot of times you'll take your first name, but I just created this template here. I've hammered it and hammered it to make sure it outputs every single time. Again, we have the role, the task, parameters around that task, and controlling the output. My dad calls it RTO, role task output. I taught him deep research. He was like, this is crazy. And so you see right here, like even you, it popularizes or it outputs, forgive me, you. So that way I know I'm sending a normalized first name to Hey Reach, to whatever I do the hey, even Sendspark, Hey Watermelon, it's not going to say Hey Jasper you, it's going to say Hey you. Yeah. So then I verify email, good old the add to lead or add lead to campaign, as we all know and love, talk about all the time. I did a Sendspark personalized video. We add to campaign. For privacy purposes, the email populates, so I'm going to go right to the instantly thing. But I'll do the initial outreach, like, hey, just congratulations. I could do some really, you saw all the context that I have right there. Get some good copy, put your offer and what you solve behind it into 75 words or less with a very strong value as your first. And then if not, you can always embed a video and go from there. So that's pretty much the two clay tables that we built. That this took me maybe an hour-ish. Really, I guess the linchpin here is really the Grok connection and the live search. That is huge. Like I love it. I feel like it didn't get enough attention, and you should definitely check it out. So that's all I have.
This is such a beautiful clay table, and I'm also impressed with your ability to explain things that are fairly technical, but make it very easy to understand. So very
Thank you.
impressive. Thanks for
That means a
sharing.
lot. Thank you.
Um,
Thanks, Bethany.
we have a lot of questions that have come in. If so, Brandon, Patrick, Ashley, if there's any that you want to take first, go for it. And start answering those questions. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through and read them to you. But if there's any that you saw come in that you want to answer right away, go for it.
I mean, there's a super basic one. Is somebody asked me for my table, what work did the N8N enrichment do? All it did was run an API call. Clay's timeout threshold is pretty low. And so if I did it in Clay, which you can do API calls in Clay, it would have timed out. So I sent it to an N8N workflow to do the call and then return what the call would return. So it was a very basic addition. It didn't even feel like really showing it. I felt like it was pretty easy to set up.
Nice. Someone asked, like for Brandon, how did you learn how to set this all up? And then I'm also curious, actually, Patrick, if you have like, how do you guys learn what to do and get your insights?
That's a great question. API docs can be boring and put you to sleep. And actually, once you finally understand API docs at the very basic level, sometimes those aren't even accurate. So a lot of chat GPT, a lot of that's why I'm balding and all that stuff. But API docs are the vital piece. But if you think about it, API calls, I like to call it, is basically the communication or the phone call towards another service. And you're really only doing two things. You're either posting something or you're getting something. And think of it like going to get a coffee at Starbucks or something. If I'm going to go get a coffee, I'm trying to it's a get request, right? But you're not authorized to get the coffee unless you pay. So your credit card is the auth or your token to your API key to say, no, give me my coffee, right? And then therefore you get the coffee. So you made a request, to get a coffee with your authorization. So I would say, and then there's the webhook. I like to think of a webhook as your best friend of just saying, hey, you know what? Anytime you need anything, I don't care if it's 2 in the morning, if you went out with your boys or your girls, you call me if you need me, right? They're like your parents, right? And so if you call them, they're just always going to be ready. So if you turn on the webhook, it allows you to send the data and it's going to catch it and you can do whatever you want. And so with Grok, for example, a lot of times it's very simple. So you need to understand the method, which is going to be usually a get or a post request. Are you looking to receive information or are you looking to push information? And usually the API docs is going to tell you which method it is. You also want to do always the curl method. So they're going to throw some other like JavaScript and Python, all these things. Go to the curl request every time because that's how we use it in Clay. And then you just need to know the endpoint and then the authorization. A lot of times it's a header or it's usually a query, but use ChatGPT saying, hey, I'm really beginner. Take a screenshot. What do I need to do? Right. And then take a screenshot of the HTTP API, the modal that pops up. Where do I punch this in? Fix this JSON for me, all the curly braces, all that kind of stuff. And it's the best thing ever. So that's what I would encourage you to do. But the more you can know around API, basic stuff around that, pushing and pulling data, that's literally what Clay's doing is you're pushing and pulling data. It's just a matter of it's baked in or not, which is obviously it's the same philosophy, it's just baked in. But the HTTP API is literally the keys to the internet. So you can pull whatever you want. It's just structuring it and knowing what you want to do next. So
And if some of those words like went over your head for people listening, like just what I always tell people is there's nothing that technical people know that you don't know. They've just done a little bit more research. So if those words like don't make sense to you, just like look them up and like try to understand. But often the biggest barrier is thinking that you won't be able to do it and not trying. So
definitely.
cool. Anything else from the Q&A that you guys want to address, or I'll start going down the list.
I just dropped this in the chat, but if anybody is interested in learning more about Clay from Clay as the organization, I just dropped a link for Clay cohorts. You can also just Google Clay cohorts. You get free credits if you join, and it doesn't cost anything. So I think and I don't know if that's going to change at some point in time. It might, but if I'm you, I'm going to get free learning all day long. Also just plugging everybody on this call here, follow them. They have amazing content. I try to do my best to get a little bit of the how in terms of Clay, but a lot of my content is going to be more of big picture and GTM strategy as a whole, but more Clay tactical. The folks that you're looking up on the call here are amazing people to follow as well.
Yeah, and if everyone wants to drop your LinkedIn in the chat too, go for it. Here, Brendan, I'm going to ask this question. Are the videos from the example personalized, or did you have to make each video and then integrate it with Instantly?
That's a you question, Bethany. Are you asking me?
Oh, well, the question was asked to you, but yeah.
Oh, the key word is watermelon, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, watermelon. There's a lot of ways Bethany can talk more on Sendspark specifically, but literally, so what I like to do, it depends on your market. You usually pop up in a bubble and then you go right here. But little thing that I like, it's like a deep fake, but I'll go right here. Or hey, watermelon. So that way you see with my lips, if I'm saying, Anthony, it's not going to look like Godzilla where my mouth is going crazy. And it's like, hey, watermelon. And then you go to, the little bubble there and you just say your spiel. Best practice that I found, Bethany or anybody else chime in, try to keep it 30 seconds or less. Just get straight to the point, like you're leaving a voicemail. And I think you're gonna, for a minute or anything longer, I would say it's subjective, but your elevator pitch should be 20 to 30 seconds tops.
Yeah. And I'm laughing because Brandon's using Sendspark for that. So that's my company. So with Sendspark, you can take that one video, like Brandon's saying, and you record saying the word watermelon. And then we use AI to change your voice and lips to say the first name, and you can show other data in the videos. And we're actually rolling out more variables now. So you'll be able to personalize those videos at scale for every person. You're definitely not recording individual videos.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is, and they're really good about this, but is make sure your videos are properly embedded. So usually you have to go to the HTML section of your sequencer, like Smart Leader Instantly, and just make sure it actually properly embeds. Make sure you send yourself a test, because we've all I'm sure done the other parts where oh, the video didn't work, right? So So yeah, the setup is there, and then usually Sendspark does a great job at matching those. So
Amazing. Any final questions you guys want to take before we wrap up? I know we didn't get to. And then I'll say too, like, we're all dropping our LinkedIn's, or if you guys want to put your email in. So if you have any questions, you want to reach out to one of us after, please feel free, because I know we didn't get to all the questions. Someone asked if you can try Sendspark and Clay without signing up. You can't. So you would have to sign up for Sendspark, but then once you have a Sendspark account, you can use it in Clay without ever having to log in. Again, you just have to create the account, and you're going to have to record that original video in Sendspark before you're able to use it from Clay ongoing.
For what it's worth, it's very quick. So I highly recommend playing around for sure.
Cool.
I would say I'm noticing a few questions just around Clay credits and just usability. I would say, I mean, it's obviously like a lot like money, right? You want to be frugal and, use wisely. I like to, again, with clean tables, nearly every row has a conditional formula. If something exists, then you should run. And there's only three things that I think is really, really a good clay table is it's either enriched with data, it's empty or null, or it says run condition not met. If it has missing inputs or any sort of other things, to me, having good table control under the logic of if then scenarios or if a condition exists, then do this, that's really going to save you a lot of credits potentially. And so I would say conditional formulas, definitely use it for nearly everything. A lot of times you're copying and pasting condition and use the AI in the conditional formulas to say, only run if this is empty or only run if this exists. And there's a lot of default things too, and you'll start to get familiar with that. And then I would also say, again, just be familiar with the integrations, know what things cost. And I would say there are certain integrations that is worth just spending a clay credit, but then there's other ones like email validation, for example, or really, really cheap API tokens. Sometimes if you want to use like 4.1 mini or a really, really cheap AI model to do low-level tasks, sometimes it just makes sense to use your own API keys if you use it that much more frequently. And that's why Clay allows you to use your own API keys. So try to do a cost analysis to see what is more effective for you guys. So
Great insight. Any final thoughts or calls to action? Any takeaways, Patrick, Brandon, Ashley?
No, try Clay,
awesome.
try N8N, try Sendspark. That's all I've got.
Try Lovable.
Grok API, a lot of good stuff.
I think in addition to trying the tools and like just be fearless in your learning, and also like use ChatGPT to say like if you're really stuck on something, like actually say like, can you actually dumb this down for me and explain this as if I am X, age? And I think where people get stuck is conceptually not really sure where to go next, but then technically that has to follow. So figure out the conceptual part first and then the technical piece. And then I think just like general outbounding is like, keep it simple, keep it personalized. That's like really like in terms of your messaging, in terms of the thinking, in terms of the experimentation, keep it simple is really the kind of final piece of advice.
That's great. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for attending on the panel and sharing your thoughts. Like, this was amazing. And thank you everyone who joined and has been with us this whole time. You guys rock. I hope you learned something new and get to try it out and see some great results. But all right. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks, guys. See you.